My name is Dr. April Park. I am a cognitive psychologist here at Fort Hays State University, and it is a great pleasure meeting you today. Well, today I do want to go over some of the topics that is actually covered in the area of cognitive psychology, and then how those topics are actually used in the field of the discipline of psychology. And I know a lot of you have great questions about what a cognitive psychology is, so I'll actually start with a very brief definition of what it is. So borrowing the terms from Eysenck and Keeney, cognitive psychology is kind of a collective term that determines what the studies are involving the internal processes as well as the mental processes, such as the topics will be how you're using your sensory systems, such as your visual systems or your auditory systems, or even the tactile information, how you're all using all those information, and then how you are storing that information into your memory system, and how those memory systems are used to retrieve the information if that is in need. Of course, you're going to use some sort of oral communication style as well as written communication style by using the language. So language is either it is a comprehension part or the production part. It is a very important part of cognitive psychology. Well, using all those basic informations, we can now use those into making a very solid decision or solving a problem that we encounter in everyday life. So even if you did not know it at this point, cognitive psychology actually involves a whole variety of topics that you encountered in your daily life. Rather than going over by topics that's listed in your book, I would actually want to share some of the questions that I received from the students that I have taught in the past few years. One of the questions that I get frequently in terms of cognitive processes is, how is brain involved in our cognitive processes? Such as, what do you think is the most interesting part of the brain? Or how does the brain develop as you age? Or so and so. I think the first question was very interesting to me. I am a cognitive psychologist, but I'm more interested in looking at how people actually make decisions, especially how consumers make decisions online. So for me, the brain part that is really interesting is actually the prefrontal cortex, which is kind of the executive function of our brain that actually collaborates with the other parts of the brain and actually make a decision. So that's only my experience, but you might be interested in other parts of the brain. And also, with the advancement of technology these days, brain and cognition or neuroscience or neurocognitive science are definitely most interesting part in the area of cognitive psychology nowadays. So that's something that you might actually interest you. The second category, which is kind of the traditional way of understanding cognitive psychology, are involved in the areas of learning and memory. And the questions that students provided are things such as, what is memory and how are memories stored? And then how do people develop very short-term memories? These all involve very interesting questions because we now do understand that we people have different types of memory systems, such as short-term memory or long-term memory or even working memory system, and then how we use each system efficiently in order to process all the information that is needed. Another question that I thought was very interesting was, do people learn better when they connect new materials with something they learned in the past? And I think this is actually physically able to approve, as well as we can actually conceptually realize this. And let me give you an example about this. You're taking this course right now, and then even if you think you're not learning much about psychology, you're learning a lot about the language or the terms that is used in the field. So if you actually take another course related to psychology, this course will actually benefit you a lot. So the next time you're taking maybe abnormal psychology or maybe general psychology, it'll actually help you to learn materials more quickly. So conceptually, I think, yes, it is true that if you learned another thing, and then if you can connect to the next concept that you're using, you can learn things faster. Physically, it is also able to prove because the neuroscientists who are looking into the brain and the dendrites that is going on in our brains actually sees the dendrites are making more connections as we learn more stuff. So I think that's a pretty interesting question that you can ask in this area. And then another question I thought was interesting was, is it true that it's harder to learn when you're older, or vice versa? Is it easier for us to learn when we're younger? I think it has a lot to do with brain plasticity, but also there's another whole lot of factors that are playing into this role. The speed of the learning curve. So it could be another topic that you can explore when you actually dig more deeper into the cognitive psychology. Another important part in cognitive psychology comes from intelligence and cognition. A lot of the questions are overlapping, but one of the very frequently questions that I can get is, what will people give different thoughts to the same question, as well as how much influence does nature affect intelligence? Meaning that we're going back to the question of nature versus nurture. So, and again, there's a whole lot of debate going on in terms of intelligence, how we are defining intelligence, what kind of facets are we looking into when we're talking about intelligence, and then what kind of testings that we're using. So in order to properly answer these questions, I think we need to look into the aspects of intelligence a lot, and I think some of you will find it very much fascinating. Well, these variety of or wide range of topics that are covered in cognitive psychology are studied in 4 different aspects. I'll introduce you to the very first one and the very last one. First one is the experimental cognitive psychology, which can be considered as most traditional way to understand and learn how people think and how people process mental information. So what will happen is we will bring participants into the lab, and in a very controlled environment, we will go over and then study the materials that we're interested in. But however, like I mentioned before, with the advancement of the greatest technology like fMRI or PET scanning or MRI, the hot topic in this area is cognitive neuroscience, which is using a lot of brain imaging techniques to study our cognitive behaviors. So these are some of the ways or approaches to study human cognition. And then if you're really interested in these topics, I'll be more than happy to answer your questions. So with that, I would like to conclude our topic in cognitive psychology. Thank you very much.